Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Welcome into Vandy247 live on the 440 Sports Network on a Thursday morning alongside Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick as we come to you live with a lot to get into. We've got some baseball to talk about. Opening weekend in the desert for the VandyBoys. We'll talk about their matchups this weekend. We'll talk about their pitching rotation for this weekend, which was announced. I don't think there's any surprises in that, but we will run through that. We'll take your comments or questions in the chat. And, of course, we'll preview Vanderbilt and Tennessee on Saturday in Knoxville at noon. That's when they'll be tipping off. You can watch on the SEC Network. Joey will be making the trip out there. Joey, looking forward to the basketball game Saturday, but I want to table that for now and start with some baseball. Talked about it yesterday with Luke. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit. I think it was Monday of this week. I had Joe Healy on, and we talked about it last week as well. But I'm interested because your piece on the rotation I thought was good. J.D. Thompson will pitch on Friday, which is tomorrow night against Grand Canyon. Ethan McIlvain will go Saturday night against Nebraska, and then Cody Bowker. I don't know if it's Bowker or Boker. Have you gotten clarification on that yet?
I've heard both from people that I trust. So I'll have to ask Will Owens, the baseball
What's up
side again. I'm gonna ask him for like the 8th time how you pronounce it, because I always forget what he says.
What's up with Vandy and last names for basketball and baseball players? Like first it was Chris Magnon this year. We thought it was Mannon. Then it got switched to Magnon.
Yeah, it's funny. Cornell never used Magnon, and Vandy asked him how he said his last name, and he said it different than what Cornell had been using for 4 years.
And then Junior Cheryl as opposed to Sherelle. So
that was also his fault. Like what he was saying the wrong last name to people, that's why they said that.
We've had all kinds of last name stuff go on with basketball and baseball, but no surprises really, Joey, in the rotation. I thought it was interesting that McIlvain goes Saturday instead of Boker Saturday. I'm interested to see how that sorts out. Or is this your 3 for a lot of the season? I think if they stay healthy, ideally it is, Joey. And we weren't able to say that about Vanderbilt baseball last year, and really the year before that either. So I think if these 3 stay healthy, I'd venture to guess this is your rotation for a good bit of the year.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it's going to be, right? J.D. Thompson was a second-team All-SEC guy in the preseason. Obviously, Ethan McIlvain, I think, has been spotty at times throughout the scrimmages and things along those lines, but probably has some of the better stuff on the roster. And it is Cody Bowker. That's what the Vandy website has. So Cody Bowker's the one. He's a strike thrower. I don't think he's going to be a blow you away guy, but I do think he'll be effective. He's not going to be a super high pick at any point, but I also think there's going to be something to him being a multi-position guy at Georgetown and now solely focusing on pitching, which he mostly did last year. But I think having him as a pitcher and allowing him to spend all of his time there for 2 years in a row is going to be a big thing as well. It's kind of like you hate to bring up Paul Skeens, but Skeens got better at pitching once he got to LSU and moved up a level because he was focused solely on pitching. And I wonder if that's the case for Bowker as well. He obviously hits the zone a lot, isn't going to blow you away, but those are 3 guys who I think they're all kind of different, but I also think that they can be capable. That's some of my worry is Vanderbilt's pitching staff, though. I think they have some options in the bullpen. I think the closer is up for interpretation at the moment, but right now I feel okay about the starting rotation, but I also think there's a little room for that to go haywire in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a starting rotation that some Vandy fans are used to, whether it's, you go back to 2011, it was Grayson Garvin, you had Sonny Gray. Like, it's not a star-studded elite rotation. I do think J.D. Thompson could be elite this year. I think, but I think you also have some of that ceiling with McIlvain. Like, McIlvain was heralded as a freshman coming into Vandy, and so I think him on that Saturday spot. Now, he was hurt a lot last year, so he'll need some time to get back to normal Ethan McIlvain stuff. But I think there's some potential there with McIlvain. But Boker does seem kind of like this could really work, or maybe it doesn't. Like kind of like the Sawyer Hawks situation last year coming in from Air Force. Speaking of Hawks, I think he's going to be a huge part of this team. But anyway, this weekend, that's the rotation. Again, J.D. Thompson will go Friday night, tomorrow night against Grand Canyon. And then Saturday night against Nebraska will be Ethan McIlvain. And then Sunday, it'll be Cody Bowker. Joey, before we move on to basketball, this is going to be tough this weekend. At Canyon, and Joe Healy actually tipped me off to this. He said last year and in years past, there were some issues with Grand Canyon's lights.
Right.
So it's a challenge playing there. I don't know if they've gotten those fixed or not, but it's going to be tough tomorrow night at Grand Canyon. And then Nebraska has a really good pitcher. I can't remember the name. Joe told me, but he might go Saturday against Vandy. So, and then Sunday, UC Irvine. These are all potential top 25 ranked teams. So it's going to be tough. I guess where I'm getting at is, what are you looking to learn about this team this weekend? In the Zoom, Tim Corbin said, he was like, yeah, I don't know. I have no clue what to expect, and that's how most coaches are, coming into this opening weekend series, but wondering what you're expecting to learn this weekend.
Yeah, it actually is a pretty decent test for them. A lot of times we'll say that early in non-conference play, but obviously it's not going to be an SEC level weekend, but playing 3 different teams in a weekend and all 3 of them having a chance to be ranked at one point or another in the year, I think is a real test for you. And I think we're going to learn a lot about their starting pitching. The opening weekend in baseball, I generally, more than you can find out anything huge about the roster as a whole, I think you can find out kind of how they're going to approach things, like who's the first guy that comes in once Thompson goes out on Friday, who's going to close if it's a 1-run game. I'm hoping to see some of those situations just so we can kind of figure out what Corbin's thinking there. What happens when you face a lefty? What's the lineup look like? That's kind of what we're looking at here. And they do have some musical chairs in their lineup. Mancini and Brody Johnson are both questionable, and that's certainly a story to follow heading into the weekend. That could affect some things. Maybe that moves Holcomb to first if Johnson has to go out, and moves Maldonado to third or something along those lines. But I do think that you just kind of learn a little bit about how they're going to approach this and what their pitchers are made of, right? Because I do think pitching is something that I'm worried about, but also you look at it, and last year they had some big names to headline the rotation, right? They had Carter Holton, they had Bryce Cunningham, Devin Futrell. None of those guys really performed up to what I thought that they could have. So I don't think the gap between this year's rotation and last year's rotation is quite as big as maybe we had thought. I thought J.D. Thompson was their best guy for a lot of the weekends down the stretch. So they do have question marks there, but I'm also not incredibly worried about the pitching. Also wonder if there's some power shown this weekend. I think that would be something that would make Vanderbilt fans really happy, especially against non-SEC opponents. So there's a lot to learn this weekend, and I like Tim Corbin said, there's a lot to expect, or a lot to try to figure out. I don't think a lot of people know a whole lot about what they've got this year, and there's a lot of musical chairs despite there being a lot of returners.
Yeah, all 3 of these opponents, by the way, this weekend were NCAA tournament teams last year. And Vandy actually played Nebraska last year or a couple of years ago, rather, 2023, and lost. And obviously they will wrap up the weekend against UC Irvine on Sunday. Vandy faced UC Irvine. Vandy fans remember in 2014, Joey, with and I think that was the last time they faced them in Omaha. So that was their second trip to Omaha. And, you look at it. I'm with you, Joey. How much power is shown? Like, this is our first look at the new Jason King offensive approach. I think there's a good chance their approach looks very different. And I think a good indicator will be our board tomorrow night. Like the board, they love talking about offensive approaches, and it'll be really interesting. How different does the approach look at the plate? Are they more aggressive, or are they still taking? I feel like taking first pitch strikes was a big, was a big thing for them, really under Mike Baxter. I'm interested in that, especially at the plate offensively for this team. But another good sign is it's on MLB Network tomorrow night. So if you're looking around, you won't be looking long as you have the sports packages. It'll be on MLB Network Friday and then Saturday night as well. So that's what we got for baseball this week. Again, it's early. Good point by Joey. I don't think we'll come with any overarching, themes over this weekend unless Vanderbilt just rolls through all three teams or they look really bad. It is hard to take away too much from opening weekends, but either way, it is opening day. MLB pitchers and catchers report. Baseball is back, but we got a lot of important basketball to talk about, Joey. And I got to start with this. Also, by the way, I want to get to Lucy's comment, by the way. She said baseball is going to be fun. Finally, an offensive team.
I think definitely an offensive team. I mean, they've got guys who are going to be MLB players in that lineup, and I don't know that I've said that a ton about their roster throughout the last couple of years. They've got a few guys who have really nice futures ahead of them if they have a good year this year, and also a lot of guys who it's a make or break year for. So I do think it's a really good test of what they can be offensively, especially with how they've changed their approach with Jason King and Ty Blankmeyer.
Corbs is quietly pulling a Clark Lee. Just watch.
He totally is, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I thought it was interesting. I mentioned this to Luke yesterday, and this is almost probably for like an hour and a half long podcast, but everything's going so fast now. So this may be even like a summer podcast after baseball, but the difference between the feeling just on campus compared to last year's academic year, athletic year is night and day. Like not even night and day is an understatement. And Corbin even talked about that. Corbin, he's close with Clark, and he said Diego Pavia was helping out at practice, picking up machines, and balls and stuff after practice. And Corbin said it just feels like there's a new energy. There's a different energy. There's a different feel around campus with the student engagement. And I'm not like, we wouldn't just be sitting here like lying about this, trying to prop up. Like, that's not what we do. Joey, that I've been wanting to talk more about that, but I think there is a good chance this baseball team is fun and maybe there's some more student involvement, with it would be hard not to with the momentum they've got.
Yeah, I don't think this product is as stale as it was last year. I thought at times last year it was like, man, just trotting out the same guys, expecting a different result. And I think, like Joe Healy said on Monday, Tim Corbin has tried to be different than he was last year, and he's tried to reinvent himself a little bit. He told me as much in January as he sat down with us. And, man, that's a real thing, and that's something that I think makes this season a lot more intriguing, right, is he's taken, I think, the biggest transfer class of his career. He's changed his coaching staff, which doesn't often happen around that program unless guys get plucked off. So I'm really intrigued to see kind of what happens this year, because he certainly has tried, maybe not to reinvent the wheel, but to reinvent himself in some ways and change kind of how the program operates, which obviously a lot of guys in his spot would not do. So that's a big thing at this point.
Big weekend as well for Vanderbilt. Big opening weekend around college baseball. So we'll continue to talk about that and preview this weekend. But there's another big game on Saturday at noon in Knoxville. By the way, Hunter says good luck in the Food City Center, Joey. It's I'm sure I don't think you get berated in there, and you're not wearing Vanderbilt gear, so you should be fine. But
Chris Dortch almost did get in a fight a few weeks back because of some drunk guy. So hopefully I'll be in the middle of the row instead of out by the seats.
All I want is you pulling a Dan Hurley walking into the press conference.
Really, that would be really professional.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
But
journalistic integrity right there.
capital J journalism.
That's right.
We have an MJ Collins comment.
Wow. MJ Collins again. And we know it's him this time from the top rope.
All I gotta say, so if you're listening and not watching, MJ Collins just commented Vandy by 6. This is actually right at the top of the show, and obviously, it's already happened once. And he said, I think he said Vandy by 10.
Yeah, against Kentucky, right?
Against Kentucky. This time he's got Vandy by 6. Against Kentucky, Vandy won by 4.
Is it 5?
Maybe 5. Okay, so this might end up being a tighter Vandy win than MJ imagines. But
how about the balls on MJ Collins to predict something like this again? Can he go 2-0?
listen, the way they match up with Tennessee is favorable. Like, and I wasn't necessarily saying that before the first matchup. Like, I think we were talking a lot about Akpara down low and who's going to guard Milicic and how are they going to handle, who's going to match up with Ziegler throughout the entire game. And Lanier, what if Lanier goes off? Like that was the big topic point. And Lanier, he had a nice game, but he didn't go nuts, in his hometown. I think the scare factor sort of went away, in the first time they played this Tennessee team. So, and number one was that. Number 2, Joey, Tennessee has 8 guys? They're playing with 8 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, Vanderbilt, meanwhile, one of their qualities is their depth. So I think Vandy matches up fine with Tennessee. Now, if Gainey and Lanier just shoot lights out, then yeah, it's going to be tough to win. But they haven't. They both won a combined 0 for 11 against Kentucky. This Tennessee team is not shooting the ball well right now. And if they keep it rolling, like we had a comment from Lucy, I'm trying to find it here. She said, all the pressure is on the Vols. Doors glide to the win. I don't know if they glide to a win but at the same time, Vandy's a lot more desperate than Tennessee to win this game. Tennessee, they're comfortably in the tournament. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt, if they get this one, boy, that'd be big. But Joey, the confidence of MJ Collins and the matchup, I don't hate. I'm not necessarily sitting here saying I think Vandy wins, but they certainly can.
Yeah, a lot of it is going to be shot making. And back to MJ Collins, man, he is not shy to let us know what he thinks. And also, I think we didn't give him enough credit a few weeks ago for the Texas game where he just pissed off Trey Johnson, to be frank. Like, Trey Johnson was really frustrated throughout a lot of that game. So there's that, but I do think they match up fine with Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee is going to have Akpara, who went 7 for 7 from the field, dunked it about every time he wanted to on an alley-oop last time. But I also think if Vandy can make some shots that maybe they haven't made over the last few weeks, and maybe they have at times, but I think if they can get open shots and hit them, unlike what they did on Tuesday against Auburn, they can go win this game. I don't see why they can't. I don't think Tennessee is a terribly unfavorable matchup for them. Vanderbilt has always struggled in Thompson bowling, but this is a new era of Vanderbilt hoops, and I don't think we should necessarily hold that over its head. But like you said, I don't think a terrible matchup. Breaking news, Tennessee's the #1 defense in the country. Vanderbilt was able to score 76 points on it the last time, though, and that was a season high against Tennessee. So I don't know that I'm going into this game counting Vanderbilt out, even though they'll probably be a couple point underdogs.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and Tennessee's they're going to be having revenge on their mind, But they also had revenge on their mind in the Kentucky game, and this Tennessee team offensively is not great. Like they, especially right now, the current state of that offense. So I'm with you. If Vanderbilt can hit some shots, maybe that they didn't hit against Auburn, and I say this again, Auburn is a defense that. They've been really good against the 3, guarding against the 3. So they had a big part in that. But say you go 7 of 17 on Saturday against Tennessee, I think there's a great shot you win the game. And then you go on the road to Rupp, not looking too far ahead, Joey, but I don't think there's reason to to doubt Vanderbilt. I know it's at Rupp, so I don't know if I'd necessarily pick them. But like the opposite of last year, these games we wouldn't even think about Vanderbilt winning, right? And even in Stack's fourth year, like these were still tough games. I know they beat Kentucky at Rupp that year as well, but Stackhouse never went on the road and beat Tennessee. He only beat them once as a whole. So I think Byington has a chance to continue rewriting the script and how people think about Vanderbilt basketball. And if they get the win Saturday, I said this about the Auburn game. If they get the Auburn win, for example, well, things get a lot. You relieve stress. The good thing is they've got opportunities to relieve stress here, right? You've got opportunities, and I think you got to pick off one of these big dogs, whether it's Kentucky, Tennessee, or A&M, because I don't think you can rely on putting too much pressure on yourself to say, hey, we've got to beat Ole Miss and Missouri at home, or even Arkansas. I think it'd be nice if you could pick off one of these big dogs.
And I wouldn't be stunned if they went and got one. I think those are two teams that don't match up terribly poorly with, especially if Lamont Butler can't play for Kentucky. I think that's a guy that really adds a dimension to their team. He plays so hard. And I just think that obviously they beat him twice, and that gives them a little bit of confidence. They are not a team that matches up terribly with either of them. Like I said, though, Vanderbilt is not going to turn it over against either of those teams a ton, I would guess. I don't think either of those teams have overwhelming front courts for Vanderbilt. Amari Williams is not a guy that's just going to sit in the paint all game and get layups every time down the floor. And Tennessee's bigs really won't do a ton either unless Vanderbilt can't find a way to stop the alley-oops for Okpara. But I also think Vanderbilt matches up okay stopping what Tennessee does have offensively. I think MJ Collins will probably be on Chaz Lanier a lot. I think Hogard and Edwards could maybe do a little bit on Ziegler, although if he can initiate offense better than he did in the last game, I think they could be in trouble. And I wonder if Vanderbilt can play a complete game in either of those games. Obviously, didn't happen in the first two games against either of those teams. Tennessee obviously made a late run, and Kentucky got up 7 late before Vanderbilt came back and won. So I think you've got to play a complete game on the road to be able to win that. You've probably got to play one of your best games to this point, maybe your best game to this point. But I think they have better basketball ahead of them than maybe they've played to this point. And they haven't played poorly, even though they've lost 2 out of their last 3 in my mind. I thought they played pretty well against Florida. They make a few more shots, and that Auburn game looks a lot better. Make a few more open ones, it looks a lot better. And then obviously beat Texas. So I wonder if it's another kind of breakthrough of sorts for this Vanderbilt team on Saturday or even on Wednesday if they don't get Saturday.
Big opportunities for them. Joey, the other thing to remember about Saturday's game is Ziegler sat for the last 7 minutes of the first half in the first meeting. I doubt that's going to happen again on Saturday. So how does that impact the game? Like you said, if Ziegler is actually on the floor, getting into their offense, they'll make adjustments. But I think you put on the Kentucky tape and say, look, this Tennessee team is struggling shooting right now. And, you're not exactly built the way Kentucky is, but you're not all that different, and so I think you throw the Kentucky tape in and take your chances. And if they shoot well, they shoot well. Maybe you make adjustments at halftime. But Willie's comment here, he says, play the all defense lineup the entire game and hold UT to 0 points. And now that's not gonna be the whole game, but that's not an awful idea. Like I do think you could see maybe more of Huffman than we were used to in the last couple of weeks. Maybe more Magnon against Tennessee. That's a Magnon game. That's when you play Magnon against a team like Tennessee with heavy minutes. Collins, like you mentioned, will play a good bit, you'd imagine. But this is a defensive team anyway. Like I think everybody can guard on this Vandy team. Like I don't think there's a guy. I mean, obviously Edwards could be a liability at times, and who else? I guess that's kind of it. I mean, nickel at times, I guess, certain matchups. But yeah, you talk about MJ Collins' comment earlier. Ken Palm, on the other hand, does not believe Vandy wins this game. Ken Palm believes Vandy has a 10% chance to win this game on Saturday, which is kind of like ridiculously low, I think. They have Tennessee winning. Ken Palm has Tennessee winning 76-62 on Saturday at home. And then looking ahead at Kentucky, Ken Palm's got Kentucky winning 89-79. So Vandy's got a chance to flip the script here, Joey. What's the one thing you're looking for on Saturday that, okay, if this happens, Vandy wins, or if this doesn't happen, Vandy's not winning?
Yeah, I look at it and I say Vandy has to be physically capable against a team like Tennessee, which I thought it certainly was last time. And it's just got to be able to initiate offense. I think a lot of teams struggle to do that against Tennessee, but you saw Kentucky was able to do it. Whatever they played, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. And Vanderbilt was able to do it last time against Tennessee as well. I think there is a real X's and O's battle here, though, between Rick Barnes and Mark Byington. First of all, Mark Byington's going to have to figure out how to stop Felix Akpar in the pick and roll. They're going to have a help side defender down there or something, because that just can't happen. Tennessee could score every time if it does that. And I thought Tennessee's margin for error in that game was made a lot smaller by Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak fouling 3-point shooters there. That gave Vanderbilt a ton of points. I would guess at home the margin for error is a bit smaller than it was. Even Mark Byington said, like, the margin for error for us against teams like that is pretty small, and I don't think he's wrong. I do think Tennessee is flawed, though, and I think if Vanderbilt can defend the 3-point line and run Chaz Lanier off of it a little bit, then that could be a real thing. But it's going to come down to who makes more threes in a lot of ways. Obviously, that won't be the number one factor in this game, but you feel like it's one of those games where Vanderbilt's got to hit 10 threes, and it's got to hold its own on the glass and take care of the ball. And then maybe you've got a chance, right? I don't think this Tennessee team is unbeatable. It's certainly not as good as last year's team in my mind. And I think if you're a Vanderbilt fan, you come into this game thinking, well, you probably think Tennessee's going to win, but also you think, man, Vanderbilt has done it before against this team, and Vanderbilt believes it can do it against this team. And I don't necessarily know that I have a strong feeling about what happens here, but I certainly don't think they're going to get run off the floor. I'll say that.
Yeah, the one thing that does worry me as well is Igor Milicic. He had 16 against them last time. I do think that could be a potential matchup, nightmare for Vanderbilt. He's playing a lot better too, by the way. He looks like a different player compared to the last time he played against Vanderbilt. He had 19 against the first game against Kentucky. He had 21 against Missouri. He only had 8 against Oklahoma, but that was a blowout. And then this past Tuesday night, he had 16 again against Kentucky. He's shooting really well. So, the pick and pops with Milicic obviously are something to watch. Knox Too Tall, yes, Joey is going to TBA. Is it Thompson Bowling Arena at Food City Center? Is that what they're...
I think it's Food City Center at Thompson Bowling Arena. By the way, we've got to figure out the credential, apparently. I thought I got an email that said I was approved, but we're going to have to... Well, I might have to break my way into the gym, Billy.
Hey, you know enough people over there. You could probably do that. But
Ryan Shumpert, if you're watching, open the back door.
Yeah, come on, Shump. But anyway, it's going to be a big opportunity for Vandy on Saturday. And again, they're not in the position, Joey, of if they lose, doomsday. That's kind of where Georgia and Texas are right now. Maybe even Arkansas. Arkansas can't afford too many more losses either. So Vanderbilt is at the top of the bubble, I think, in the SEC. Just because, you look at the number of losses, right? They're 5-6. Texas has 7 losses, I think. Georgia might already have 8. Arkansas, I think, has 8. So, they're sitting, I don't want to say pretty, but they're at the top of the bubble. That's not a bad place to be at all. You got to find at least 2 more wins and probably 3 here down the stretch. I don't know where they get them. I think they can get them, Joey. But, man, it's going to be interesting to see where they get them.
Yeah, and Rupp and Thompson Bowling would be great places too. Also, I wonder if you get in with 7 just because you win in a place like that too. I wonder if that decreases your need for a 3rd win as well. I think you're obviously aiming for 8. 8's the magic number.
That's what Luke said. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, if you get another quad 1A win, which they've got 2 of right now with beating those 2 teams at home, I wonder if Kentucky's still in that actually. But they definitely have 1 with Tennessee. Kentucky could be the 2nd. And then you get a 3rd with it being on the road. That's a really good top of your resume. And you probably got to end with 4 or 5 quad 1 wins, but that would be a great start to the last stretch of the season where you're in the middle of a stretch where you play 6 ranked teams in a row. Although none of those games, like Auburn, are unwinnable. All these teams have weaknesses now, and I think Vanderbilt's able to beat good teams. I'm not sure at this point it's able to beat elite teams. It's not going to play another truly elite team, though. It's going to play teams that are bad matchups for it and teams that are really good. None of these teams, I think Vanderbilt is incapable of beating, though, and it's a pretty good feeling to have going into the last couple of weeks if you're Vanderbilt, because frankly, at this point last year, we were looking at it and saying, man, they're not going to beat any of these teams. These are all way out above their league. And at this point, I don't necessarily feel like anybody is out of Vanderbilt's league. I also feel like Vanderbilt could lose to anybody on their schedule the rest of the way, though. And they're in a scary spot, also a promising spot, though, where if you take care of business, you're an NCAA tournament team, and you honestly might not even be that close to the bubble if you win 3 or 4 games the rest of the way.
Vandy Dandy says Vandy needs to win at Georgia the last game of the season. That would keep them above them. That could keep them above them, but they might already be above Georgia at that point. Mm-hmm. Georgia could really fall apart here. They are 4-8 in the SEC right now, and they've got Missouri coming up Saturday in Athens, and then they've got to go to Auburn, and then they've got Florida at home, and then they've got Texas. Georgia could fall off the rails here. Now Vanderbilt could too as well, right? That's you're in the SEC, right? So you know these bubble teams are going to earn that ticket to the dance. I mean, more than any year ever. So you know, yeah, they could. That could. I think that, and it probably does, Joey. In all honesty, I think that game in Athens, it keeps coming back to me that could be huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just the Tyron Lawrence game. That's a real bubble game, and it is refreshing to think about a game in March being meaningful for Vanderbilt basketball. An SEC tournament's going to be meaningful for them if they don't already have 8 wins going into it. So, Billy, it's going to be a fun month and a half to come up here, and I think people have been waiting on this to come off the rails for Vanderbilt basketball for a long time, and I genuinely don't think it is. I think this team is right in the mix of it, and I don't expect them to fall off the bubble at this point. I think they're going to be interested in Selection Sunday at the very least, and they might be flying out on Selection Sunday. So it's going to be a fun couple weeks coming up here for Vanderbilt basketball. Tomorrow or Saturday and Wednesday are going to be big games for them, though, and if they can get one of those, they're sitting pretty heading into the last couple weeks.
Knox Too Tall asks, do they have the gas? Feels like we've been dying out late. I do think that is something to monitor, and I told this to Luke yesterday, like maybe they don't practice as much. You know, maybe they're not as physical in practice. I think down the stretch here, Byington's going to have to be really smart with how he manages certain guys, and making sure they're at their best. You know, I don't. This team is different though. Like I think the way they sub and the way they play, I don't worry too much about fatigue. But you know, when you're playing a team like an Auburn or even a Tennessee and a Kentucky and an A&M, that's when you worry about it. I don't worry as much about it against teams like Georgia, Arkansas, and maybe even Ole Miss for that matter. Clark, to wrap it up, will Hemingway ever play? Not this year. I know that. And maybe not ever, I guess not ever at Vanderbilt because he's a grad student.
He has not officially been ruled out for the year, but I would be stunned if he got on the court the rest of the year. That's where I'll leave it. There was a rumor somewhere that he was playing Saturday, and that is very false. He's not playing Saturday. He's also not practicing right now.
Yeah, so I'm glad we've got that wrapped up. There's no more. That was a big discussion point early on in the season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll keep asking because it hasn't been declared to this point, and we'll get it officially at some point, I would presume. But right now, I'd be pretty surprised if that happened. I can't tell you definitively right now that he's not going to play the rest of the year, but I mean, just look at the logic of it, right? There's 3 or 4 weeks left in the season. If he started practicing this week, he might be able to play next week, maybe. And how do you figure out the rotation from there? He's a good player. Seems like a good guy. It just doesn't make sense to play him right now just because of where they're at and how the rotation is settled in. It wouldn't have made sense if he was able to start practicing a week ago.
Yeah, it is what it is. And on the other hand, it does make sense for Vandy fans to, I'm sure a lot of them will be glued to their TVs this weekend. We've got baseball tomorrow night on the MLB Network at 7:00 against Grand Canyon. That is at Grand Canyon. And then Saturday night at 7 against Nebraska. And then they'll play UC Irvine on Sunday at 1:00. And then Vandy and Tennessee at noon on Saturday in Knoxville. Joey will be out there. We'll have post-game coverage and all that. So big weekend for Commodore fans. I want to get this wash house read here out of the way. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals, the Wash House, take care of that for you. They've got 2 convenient locations in Nashville. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and clean laundry ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. That's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks again, everybody, for watching and listening to another episode of Vandy 247 Live.